Hello everyone, it's me, Matt. Yes, you're actually looking at me today, but as young Matt. This is me back in the British Army in 2007. Yes, this is prior to my deployment to Afghanistan, training at BATUS, otherwise known as British Army Training Unit Suffield, which is basically where I came to fall in love with Canada, and it basically is why I'm here today. But unfortunately, I was very close to actually not surviving this training exercise in BATUS in Canada. If you don't know what BATUS is, it's basically a training area, the largest training area that the British Army has the ability to work in here in Alberta, Canada, Western Canada, which allows battle group-sized strength of British Armed Forces to practice on the open prairies, blowing stuff up against OPFOR or against other, situations that get presented upon you. It's normally about 2 weeks of live firing. It's changed a lot since then. I know they call prairie storms or prairie thunders or whatever the hell they call them now. When I did my med man, as they were called, medicine man exercises, they lasted for about 6 to 7 weeks, sometimes a little longer, and it was phased into a few different phases. You started off with your ranges, normal ranges, live firing ranges, then you do sort of a blank firing range, and then you do what's called a TERS exercise, or basically a system where you play laser tag with one another. It's pretty good fun, but it's also one of those challenging exercises you'll do in the British Army. A lot of fun, very rewarding, and I just absolutely loved every second of it. But as I said, I nearly didn't survive it. I'm going to tell you a story today, which, there's a lot of stories I could tell you about my life nearly ending. A lot of people think, yeah, Matsimus, you must have had some gnarly situations in Afghanistan. Yes, I certainly did. But this one was actually one of the more scary situations that I've ever been in my life. I've have hit IEDs, been engaged by the Taliban in Afghanistan. I haven't actually walked on IEDs, of course, but my vehicle has been struck by them. We have been engaged before by Taliban, been in contact in firefights, etc. But none of that really was as scary as the situation I'm about to tell you. So the story starts in, as I said, 2007. We were getting ready to deploy to Afghanistan in 2008 in Helmand province with the British Army in an armoured repair company. At the time, I was part of a 7 armoured company of a 2 battalion REME, or Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. So I was basically servicing and supporting armoured vehicles on the front, whether it be infantry, Challenger 2, CVRT, anything with tracks, or even with wheels at that time. At the time that I was attached to a armoured repair crew of 3 men in what's called a Warrior 512. It's an armoured repair vehicle. It's not the recovery vehicle. The 513 is the repair vehicle, which has the winch and the blade on the back, which allows you to do a little bit more than the 512 variant is. But what you're looking at right now is basically the 512 variant. It's a power pack repair vehicle for the most part. It can lift its own power pack out, its own engine and other vehicles' engines, and basically do all means and methods of repair in the field. So it was a very late and very long evening that we just got into. One evening, sort of towards the end of the exercise, we're all extremely tired in my crew. Had my commander and my driver who were in the vehicle, and I was in the back as a third man, which is basically you're the lowest of the low. You're in the back, just supporting the rest of the crew. But we were a really good crew. We had a good time, but we were exhausted. We were very tired. It was a very hot week that week, extremely hot in the prairies in summer, which is when we train. And we got tasked at roughly about 2-3 in the morning to go and pick up a repair vehicle that had also broken down and to try and change its power pack that had failed somewhere in the middle of nowhere. We were given some coordinates, grid reference, and got sent out on our merry way. Now, when we're on exercises like Medman, or whatever they're called nowadays, for the most part, you're in a tactical sense, which basically means there are enemy positions around, people are looking for you, and you have to play as if you're in a real-time war scenario. When I was in the vehicle at the time, we were told that the crew were to drive the vehicle in what's called tactical lighting, which is basically saying don't put any lights on. You weren't allowed to drive anywhere with lights on other than what's called a convoy light, which is just a small little bulb at the back of the vehicle allowing someone behind you to see you. Well, because no one was behind us, we had no lights on at all. Sadly, we also had no night vision, so we were relying upon the twilight of the moon to allow us to see what was going on ahead of us. As you can see, this is also a disaster for, what's about to happen. So what was going on at the time is we were driving across the prairie, looking for this vehicle, heading on the grid coordinates, My driver, of course, quite exhausted. My commander exhausted. I'm in the back of the 512. Now, if you've ever been inside of a 512, you'll understand what I'm talking about, but it's very enclosed, extremely cramped, especially as a repair crew. Everything in the back is basically filled with tools, equipment, spares, parts, whatever else you need to operate your vehicle, including your own personal military equipment, whether it be your webbing, your rifles, or your extra ammunition, etc., etc. So very compacted in the back, and I was exhausted. And as a third man, you do have the privilege of being able to have a little snooze in the back of the vehicle when nothing is going on, and you probably wonder how the hell do you fall asleep, Matsimus, when you're trudging across open terrain and prairies and bouncing around all over the place. And trust me, when you're in an armoured crew for long enough, you kind of just fall asleep anywhere. Anyway, so we were travelling across the open prairie, and I was in the back just kind of chilling out and fast asleep for the most part, kind of in and out of sleep. And I had my headset on because you have to have it on, of course. And being a bad crewman at the time, not following standard operating procedures, I did not wear my safety harness, which is basically a 4-point connecting harness on the rear seats of the vehicle that allow you to kind of secure yourself in case you have any accidents. At the time, because I wanted to sleep a little bit better, I didn't wear it. Bad move. Silly move, in fact. I was wearing my headset, driving along, and all of a sudden I just felt the inertia of everything starting to move really awkwardly. I had my headset on and could hear my commander shouting the F word over and over and over again. My driver doing the exact same thing. And at the exact same moment as that happening, I felt the entire vehicle start to turn into what was basically like being in space of zero gravity. I was all over the place. I had no idea what was going on. Basically being thrown around in the back of the vehicle like a tumble dryer. It was an absolutely terrifying experience. I've been in some gnarly situations, even outside of the military, some scary life and death situations, but this one really took me off guard. The reason for that is that I was completely unprepared and had no idea what was going on. I could just feel the butterflies in my stomach, everything drawing out of my chest, and just all the equipment that was in the back of the vehicle landing and smashing in my face all over the place, rolling away. What was happening is basically we were about to flip upside down. What you're looking at right now is our vehicle in the position that it landed in once we had basically rolled over upside down. Yes, the vehicle had actually gone over a very small embankment. I say small, but when you look at the grand scheme of things, a rather large embankment. And basically, we had tried traversing across a track, which on the map doesn't show you the embankment. It just shows you a road. And that's very standard of Alberta, especially with Suffield, because there's just not enough, features for you to need to narrate what's there. It was just a track. You just cross it, and hopefully you haven't got embankments on either side. This one, unfortunately, had some very gnarly embankments. My driver at the time was driving fairly quickly, and by the time he had noticed that this embankment was in front of him, the front 3 road wheels of the Warrior had already gone over the lip of the ledge of this embankment, and therefore there was absolutely no way to recover this vehicle from flopping over on its front. The reason for that is when you get a 30 to 35 ton vehicle and its inertial weight dragging it over the rest of that embankment, there's no way you can stop it. He put his brakes on, inherently, trying to stop the vehicle, but it did not work. The tracks locked, it slid down the embankment, the nose dug into the floor, and flipped us up all the way onto its back. Me in the back, absolutely terrified, had no idea this was happening. Of course, the commander and the driver had pretty good understanding of what was happening because it was happening right in front of them. My commander, sticking his head and torso out of the cupola, could see what was going on. The driver was what was called half hatch, which allows the driver to actually still see out without going buttoned down or hatch closed and locked in place, but provides him with enough overhead protection to prevent situations that I'm talking about from actually killing him. When the vehicle did go over the embankment and land on its top, the entire weight of the vehicle was resting upon a small metallic pin holding that driver's hatch open. That was it. If that pin had failed, my driver would have for sure been killed. There would have been no way of him to recover from that. 35 tons of pressure would have crushed that hatch straight down on his skull, compressed him into his driver's seat and killed him. No word of a doubt. Luckily, the driver's hatch did what it was supposed to do. My commander was actually also very lucky. He was actually quite aware of what was about to happen too and was smart enough to get into the cupola, press his hands up inwards and upwards towards the top of the hatch, and hold himself out, basically holding on for dear life and just going for the ride. Me in the back, though, had no understanding of what was going on. I didn't get to see anything outside. It was just a steel box that I was inside of, and all I could hear on the net was screaming of F, 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 and rolling onto our back. Now, when I came to in the back of the vehicle, everything was still running. The fuel pumps, the engine was kind of chugging somewhat. I heard the commander tell my driver to shut the engine off, pulled the, the shutdown procedure. Vehicle shut down. The commander climbed through, kicked me in the back of the head, said, "We need to get out of here." And of course, rightly so, we did. There's a lot of diesel inside of that vehicle, and although diesel is extremely difficult to set fire to, when in confined spaces like that, it can be quite easy to set into a more combustible mist, especially when the vehicle is upside down, which is not the way it's supposed to be. Saying that, diesel was pouring out everywhere from the 800 litres of storage fuel that is inside the compartment of the vehicle. When the commander booted me to get out, me and him were both trying to remove the rear door and open it so we could exit. But because the vehicle was upside down, the weight on the hinges would not allow the door to open. It was definitely an inherent design flaw of the vehicle. Normally, vehicles aren't supposed to operate upside down. This one, though, was giving us real problems. It took me and my commander probably several double drop kicks together at the same time to pop open the rear hatch. Once we got out of the vehicle itself, we came to the stark realization that we were still alive, but then instantly realized that our driver is still inside the vehicle. My commander ran out to the front to see if he could assist, and I went straight through the back to see if I could get him from inside. Crawling through back over the top of the fuel tanks and through the compartments of the vehicle, the fuel pump's still running and the electronics still on, or the master switch still on. It was pretty freaking scary. I honestly thought at any moment we could potentially go up in flames. Crawling through, I did eventually get to the driver's compartment. Now, again, his driver's seat is operated in the emergency system by pressing a small lever, the rear of the seat pressing and falling down and allowing me to drag him out the back. This is in a normal situation, whereas the vehicle would be upright, but once again, it is upside down. The lever would not work. Using the special depressed plunge that you're given to try and pull the drivers out, the seat would not collapse. My driver panicking, fuel pouring into his driver's compartment, he was starting to get a little nervous, and so was I. The commander had absolutely no way of hell trying to get the driver out of the half-hatch compartment from the front of the vehicle because of the way the vehicle was sat. He just couldn't fit through the gap. It was up to me and the driver to make the driver's seat actually be collapsed itself. It took probably 5 or 6 attempts for us to actually bust open the catch and allow the seat to depress and fall all the way down to the bottom to allow me to drag the driver out. Eventually, we did drag the driver out, and he was fine other than me and him completely coated in diesel. Looking back from outside of the vehicle, we were astonished we were able to survive such a very dangerous and severe crash. Now, Battis, or Suffield in general, is an extremely dangerous environment to work in as a training routine. There are so many hazards. If it's not the terrain, it's the weather. If it's not the weather, it's the weapon systems. If it's not the weapon systems, it's the animals or lifestyle there. Scary stuff. It's definitely a training environment that tests you on every level. And this accident really kind of brought into retrospect, like, wow, we need to be more smart about how we're doing this kind of training. From that moment on, we actually had our company commander at the time say none of his crews anywhere were going to be driving without lights on. It was just too dangerous. This actually brought into an SOP during the exercise too, that if it was a tactical situation, that no one was to be driving on their own at night in the prairies, because at the time when we had the accident, we had no form of communication other than our radios on the net. Suffield, or Battis, is such an amazing training area. It's huge, but unfortunately, due to that size and sparse land, you don't have communication with anyone for miles and miles and miles, and the only way you can communicate with them normally is via your radios. We didn't have any kind of sat phones or mobile phones that worked at the time either, and we couldn't get a hold of the range control. So we were basically somewhat isolated there for a good couple of hours. Luckily, my friends from my own company were coming back from another recovery job in their Foden 6x6 vehicle, which is the vehicle that you're seeing actually recover the vehicle that we crashed in. Thank goodness to my good friend Nick Evans and the rest of his crew for actually finding us. They were able to pull us out of the crash there and get us back on the road within a week. When we actually pulled the vehicle back in, we were able to repair it and get it going again. But I just thought I'd share this kind of story with you because I get a lot of questions as to, hey Matt, like, was there any scary moments in the army? And this was probably the most scary, not for the fact that I was going to die, it was the fact that I was terrified for my driver. My driver was really having a tough time when it was happening. He was kind of in a bit of a panic. I was panicking. I honestly thought we were going to go up in flames at any minute. I know diesel is extremely difficult to turn into a combustible, flammable situation. But, at the time, your brain doesn't think logically, right? You just think, oh my God, I'm getting literally, like you walk into a shower or sit in a bath of diesel. That's what I was basically dealing with and trying to pull my driver out of there. And, I also didn't know how long that pin, the metallic pin holding the driver's hatch, was going to stay for. I mean, it's just a small little pin. If that steel pin sheared or broke due to the amount of weight that was being pressed upon it from that vehicle, my driver would have been squished in front of my face, which was terrifying. So luckily for us, we all survived and made it out. I'm really happy that it wasn't anything major and that we were able to get through it. But I just thought I'd share it with you because it kind of just gives you a little bit of an understanding of, even in training, things can be really, really serious. You've got to be paying attention, be diligent, be vigilant as to what you're doing, challenge the norms. People telling you, oh yeah, just drive out into the middle of the prairie with no lights on at 3 a.m. when you're all absolutely exhausted and go repair a vehicle. It's just a recipe for absolute disaster. So I'm not saying, go to your CEO and say, do one, mate, I'm not doing it. But sometimes you need to figure out what you're doing. Is it logical? Is it safe within the bounds of common sense and within your own safety? If it's not, feel free to ask questions. Don't say, I ain't doing that, buddy. But ask questions, because in this situation, we could have asked the question is, look, we haven't slept for literally almost 2 days. We're exhausted. We're driving into the middle of nowhere. We haven't got a designated point to actually head to. We're just trying to follow the GPS and coordinates and the map. It's pitch black. There's barely any moonlight, and we're traversing across terrain, which is always going to be difficult, especially in Suffield. We should have been able to put our headlights on to see where we were going. It would have definitely prevented this accident, and, in theory, all 3 of us could have quite easily been killed in that scenario. My driver being squished, my commander being squished, and me in the back being smashed over the head with an Artissiva toolbox, which weighs probably about half the weight of me, probably like, 40 pounds, I'm just kidding. But it is heavy, okay? And that could have killed me, and it nearly did because I had rather hard headache for the rest of the day. A couple of bumps and bruises, didn't get anything serious. No one was really injured. And we kind of laughed about it afterwards, but just something to think about for those of you who are training out there or maybe have your own stories that you want to share with me in the comment section below. You're more than welcome to. So yes, that was the day I nearly died in Canada, and honestly, after that exercise, I fell in love with the country and moved over here anyway, so maybe it was a good thing. Stark realization that my life nearly ending here allowed me to start a new one. I don't know, having an epiphany right now. Anyway, thank you everyone for joining me. I hope you enjoyed my little story today. If you want to hear more of these kind of stories, feel free to leave me a comment section comment so I can have a little read and see if you want me to do some more. Feel free to also leave me a like, and if you want to support my channel, please go check out my Patreon account. I would really appreciate that. And thank you to everyone who has been donating and supporting towards that account. I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.